Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today we are giving a first impressions or overview of Soul Raiders.
Yes. And this is a Board Game Code video, despite the awkward introduction, because I messed up the introduction on the other video.
There we are.
Speaking of which,
I was hoping for the admission of guilt.
head on over to Quackalope. I'll throw a link down below if you want to see us play.
We just got done doing a prologue tutorial session.
I should probably flip these so people don't see things as we go through it.
That's fair.
Yeah, because this is an adventure game with unlockable aspects that we're going to kind of hide on the table. We'll leave just a little bit of a hint for you to...
I mean, there is going to be a bit of B-roll of these cards.
They're not paying attention. They don't watch B-roll.
That's true. No one watches B-roll. It's because people over here on Board Game Co. aren't used to having it done.
That's reasonable.
If you'd like B-roll, leave a comment down below letting him know it's something he should figure out in the next 5 years. Whatever the case, that's not the point of this video. We just got finished doing the tutorial session of Soul Raiders.
Yes.
We can't do a full review.
No. It's limited. It's we
don't have everything.
We had an introduction, a guided experience, and one that very much is a guided and therefore limited experience.
A drive of the mechanics.
To give you concepts, to give you an example here, this game is essentially a point-and-click adventure game. It's a game where you're going to be choosing which, do I go through that door, do I jump over that ledge, do I engage with this? You're walking around. Every time you walk around, you introduce another card to the board. And in this prologue, we had 9 cards compared to the 42 cards a standard chapter would have. The game is designed to be replayable. It's designed to have multiple pathways and ways to get to the same point. So you might have a variety of endpoints and different ways that you can interweave. And
you mentioned the idea of a point and click, which this really does exemplify the idea of a game like Myst, which would be a video game where you're moving from room to room, trying to solve puzzles, thinking about and attaching abilities as you progress through almost these storybook elements, right? That's what this is trying to do on the table.
Very much so. And so this guided experience, this prologue, kind of gave us directions that we could kind of wander through.
I understand what the game's doing.
Yes.
I don't know what the full experience will be like.
Correct.
Because I haven't played the story. I haven't even started the story. But I understand what it's doing.
And with that general experience, let's give you a quick overview of how it actually plays out. The general idea is, like we said already, it's point and click. You're going to have a hand of 4 cards every single round that you're using to trigger different actions. You have movement cards. You have combat actions. It's a hybrid one. You can do either way. So you have a variety of actions you're trying to take as you move around the board, engage with different elements, like you interrogated a goblin. I investigated a trap door and eliminated the trap, which I do want to check what that would have done to us. All kinds of different things.
There's a few things I want to read after.
Yeah, basically. But it's a little bit of narrative, a lot of point and click choosing directions to go, a little bit of tactical card play as you go through this game, managing your threat levels as the game slowly escalates as the game progresses, because that threat track is slowly moving up, your health is slowly diminishing, the number of cards in your hand slowly diminishing. It gives you that basic sequence as you try to accomplish different goals that are undefined at the start of the adventure. Your goals are kind of loose. You're going through it and you're going to encounter cards that tell you, well, you accomplished what you needed to accomplish, which is the narrative aspect of the game.
We peeked through a door, messed with some mechanics, interrogated some people. Like, there's little elements that you can choose to engage with or not, and not all of them were positive, and not all of them were negative.
And they will have different outcomes. You might kill someone before or after you have a chance to interrogate them. And that
will affect a card. It would change the narrative.
A card. There's aspects of, if you can potentially stop that goblin from activating that trapdoor, then you'll get rid of the trapdoor card from the game and you'll be safe as you progress. So there definitely does have that element of choice and pathways in this game, although some of it will be guesswork and others will be deduction and others will be the card play you go through, the choice of being invisible or teleporting around the board, all those different choices in this game. And the full game is going to be across 3 chapters. You're going to have a chapter which is going to take 3 hours or so to play, and then you can, I don't know if you can save it or not, I don't know that.
I would assume with a game like this, there's going to be, I'm speaking hyperbolically or whatever. Hypothetically? What's hyperbolically? Like super gratuitously?
This game's gonna have so many chapters and ways to save the game.
You're not gonna be able to save this game in 12 different steps.
That would be hyperbolically.
I would assume because of the nature of this game, a save system is something they'll have to integrate to some degree.
It's possible. If the sessions are 3 hours, I don't want to commit either way. I mean, it's not our game, but I don't know.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's 3, but either way, whether or not there is, it's going to be across 3 different chapters, narrative arcs that one spans into the next, and your characters upgrade between those arcs. That's generally how the game plays.
Cool.
So my usual format for reviews is what we liked, didn't like, see others not liking. I'm kind of going to ditch that a little bit and just go for freeform conversation because I really refuse to call this a review given the limited nature of the prologue we went through. And we played through it 1.5 times. We played through it half a time to get a feel for the game, came down for the playthrough, experienced 90% of the prologue of what it's showing us, missed out on a few things that I want to read some stuff after. But from there, let's talk about stuff.
Yeah, where are you on this one? Because I think, for me, I've gone back and forth on my experience with it and my interest in what it's trying to do as a system. And I'm curious to see if you've shifted the same way I have.
So, I'm still gonna talk about stuff I like and didn't like. But I will say, I think the best word I could use to describe my entire experience is intrigued. That is, if I was using a single word to describe this experience, it would be intrigued.
I would add in a term hopeful.
Hopeful. Yeah, I don't disagree. There are elements that I like about this game, but also the prologue took away some things that make me also wondering. Mm-hmm. Prologue, so I don't know. But I like the point and click, which initially I did not love the point and click. Mm-hmm. And even now, I think it very much depends on that final game. If the game really does give us a wide, branching swaths of ways you can progress through the game, then I'm very intrigued.
Yeah. If every chapter has what this is hinted at, which is twisted narratives and that choose-your-own-adventure style campaign, where I murder something here and then the next time I play through, I don't make that decision and it does genuinely change and transform the experience, it's doing something cool that I haven't seen other games really do in this type of system. Yeah, the movement around is very interesting. The ways things can progress backwards, falling through a trapdoor and ending up where you were 3 turns ago. That stuff could be fun. One thing that I haven't noticed yet that I'd really like to see... Hints on the artwork? There's nothing right now that's indicating to me what's going on in the artwork. Yes. We had the little bit of text that talked about a trapdoor, which we could observe. But we have somewhere our overarching... Right here we had a little bit of a hint there that there was something. But I really was expecting, and will be hopeful in the end game, for a bit more information of what might be happening in the narrative, in the artwork. The artwork's so beautiful and so aesthetically pleasing, but really, outside of just observing and going, oh, that's a lovely scene, I had no incentive to pay attention to the artwork outside of these top tiles. I agree. Which means I don't need the bottom part of the artwork. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I want elements of 7th content in here where you're kind of looking at a tile and being like, well, if I interrogate that goblin... Are there any hints as to what's to come? I want a reason to pick up every tile and pass it around the table to see what people are seeing. Yeah. I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. It might be too far in progression. It might not be something that they intended for it. It was something that I was hoping for when we started playing. Now, other elements I like about that same idea of how things progress, I love these deck of story cards and the way you will and won't encounter some depending on choices. I like the story progression. I actually thought that was very nice. And the way that you can tell that you've not triggered some elements of it makes you sort of want to go back through and explore. We did that. Yeah. Like, our very first decision we made in the last game, we did differently in this game. We deactivated a trap, which was great, but we also could have never fallen through the trap to begin with. That's true. There's like 3 or 4 different ways that could have played out. And that's with like 15 cards as opposed to the 70 cards that every chapter will have. These scripted enemies, I don't know if I guess the scripted enemies are helpful because each one, the defined enemies, the challenges for the round, I don't think the enemies themselves gave me that much of a feeling of anything. There's some abilities, they all have a unique ability of how they interact with the game. I wasn't against them. I just wasn't intrigued by them. If this game was just a consequences and benefits point-and-click adventure game, and you removed the enemies, I wouldn't miss anything right now. Well, I mean, I like the fighting. I don't feel the enemies were again. If it was consequence and benefit, like you're struggling against something. Okay. But for me, the enemies are an ambient you're struggling against something. You're saying falling through a trapdoor on its own with no enemies is just as impactful. Just as impactful as... I agree. And honestly, might be more interesting. The enemies are the biggest issue I have. And I've been through this. You don't like the artwork of the enemies, not the game. Yeah, so let me get into this, because it matters to me, because it just doesn't... I listened to the narrative a little bit more when I was reading it this time than I did last night when we were reading it again. Yeah. You're in a dream state. You have these ethereal creatures that are coming through. You're seeing abominations that shouldn't exist in the space. I understand what the narrative's trying to do. But right now, the artwork doesn't communicate to me what the narrative so far has told me that it's doing. And doesn't match the general... It doesn't match the aesthetic of the game. They look too powerful for what I'm fighting. And how easy they often are to take out. They look... Yeah, that's an issue for me. I sort of want a tribe of little golems, or I want little squishy things. If they're squishy, make them squishy. If they're big and powerful and I should be terrified of them, like this dude... That guy was I mean, some of these guys that we defeated, that 10 out of 10 guy over here, that's a big deal. I'm okay with them popping out and looking serious. Yeah. And I like these scripted ones a bit more. But this deck of random enemies, I almost wish the artwork didn't exist for them, because it takes me out of the game, because they don't fit the environment and the story that I have in my head. And I'm a narrative player, and the narrative of this game is why I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I'm not bothered by it. I understand and agree with everything you're saying. I'm not personally bothered by it. For me, it's more the mechanical aspect. I mean, this splits the two of us. You're more bothered by the thematic integration. I kind of want more from the mechanical aspect of fighting it. Card play. How do you feel about card play?
I actually enjoyed card play quite a bit. It's a simple puzzle right now. I'd like more opportunities to upgrade. I think we're both going to agree with that. You like powers and abilities, and you're slowly pulling me over onto your side. But I actually liked the puzzle of card play. I liked the ability to combine cards and have multi-use cards. I liked the spells a lot. They felt important when we were able to use them.
Spells are a lot of fun.
And I enjoyed the saving, like stockpiling cards up at the top.
And there can be a puzzle there as well, because sometimes you'll have like these powerful enemies you want to take out, as well as hordes of enemies. You'll have late game, you'll have spawns of enemies surrounding you, and you'll want to play that spell that takes out all enemies of strength 3 or lower, but there's a big bad in front of you who stops all spells.
Well, and if I played through this again, I would know that I only made it through my entire deck once. By the time we were close to endgame on the track.
Because prologue.
I understand.
Real game, you'd go through it a bunch.
Real game, I'd go through it a few more times, but there's a deep deck here. And the fact that we're reducing our hand size as we play means that when I get a really powerful card out, I may not use it early game. I may save it a lot more strategically.
Especially because of these single-use cards.
Yes.
Some of the spells, if you use it for its number, will stay in your deck. But if you use it for its ability, it's gone for the rest of the chapter. The whole chapter, it's gone. So you want to factor that in. The card play, I definitely enjoyed the card play of the game. One thing I definitely did not... So this is an interesting one again. This is almost the reverse. This is something that didn't bother me in the prologue, but I can see it bothering me in the full game. The game makes it so that things get more difficult for you as you progress, and you get weaker as you progress. I don't mind more difficulty when we're ramping up at the same time. But it kind of feels like you're slowly losing health. You're not getting that much more powerful. There's a little bit of deck building, but you're not getting, at least, again, prologue-wise, you don't get a ton more powerful. And meanwhile, the enemies are just getting harder, and you're going to slowly run out of health, which is going to have you drawing fewer cards.
Well, and let's clarify, there's a lot of games that do that type of system that are really good games that just aren't right for you. This is on your list of, I personally...
Mechanics I don't like.
Alexander Radcliffe don't like games that make me feel weaker while the game escalates.
Correct.
I think of like this War of Mine, a game that is always working against you. Kingdom Death even would be a game where everything's always punishing.
Nemo's War.
Nemo's War would be a good example. Acclaimed game, punishing, not for you.
I like games that make the game more difficult, but give me the tools to feel more powerful. I like that desperate fight to the finish.
As long as I'm able to watch the gameplay video, we got to an end spot where I thought it was over. And we were actually able to be a bit competitive. As long as I'm able to compete, I don't mind feeling weaker and weaker because I understand the narrative of it. I understand why it's not fun for you. I don't know that I like it, but I don't mind it existing.
So again, prologue didn't bother me at all. But I wonder about the full game. But the idea that you start with drawing
you could get down to drawing 2 cards a turn,
and the card play is like, I mean, that's the fun. Going down to 2 cards a turn, if or when that happens. It doesn't strike me as something I'm interested in experiencing. If I like the card play, if I like the challenge of how am I going to combine my cards in different ways, if I do these 2 cards together, I can charge across the map, but I might encounter enemies along the way. But if I do these 2 cards, I can do this. When you're down to only 2 cards, it takes away the decision space.
Doing a single thing.
Even if it's competitive, it's just, the decision space is lacking. So I'm worried, concerned. Didn't actually bother me, but certainly concerned for the full game. Anything else?
Really genuinely intrigued and hopeful for this game.
If there's one word, it would be intrigued.
I don't know that it's perfect for me yet.
No.
At the moment I'm paying attention to it. I want to see what they're offering. I want to see a little bit more of the narrative for myself personally, understand a bit more about the world that we're experienced in. And I kind of want to see how this deck building system, this bit of deck building system progresses from chapter to chapter. I'll be looking for them to talk about that during the campaign, because this is where the funnest part of the game is. I don't mind drawing down to 2 cards if I'm able to, over the course of the story, get some really powerful abilities that let those 2 cards feel good.
Speaking of which, another concern I have is the way you build your deck in this game is you have a set, it's going to be like 15 cards or something like that, I believe. 15 cards you can upgrade, but you have to go through them in order or pay a cost each time, which means, unless I'm misunderstanding the way the rules work on these, it kind of seems like it's almost always going to make more sense just from your economy of your upgrade tokens to just go through an order. I don't want that, or at least if you do have to pay that cost, I should be able to cycle it in some way or something. Right now, I don't want the game to force me to a linear pathway of upgrade progression. However they do it, it needs to be reasonable and achievable and make sense to upgrade in a way that is choosing what suits the circumstances rather than just whatever you want to do. Yeah. That's it?
These are great.
Oh, the miniatures are gorgeous. Yeah.
I mean, just off note. Yeah. Off note. These are great.
Yeah, I don't think it's a miniatures game. I think because of the heavy card play, it's a game with miniatures. Mm-hmm. It's more of a narrative point and click. I don't think I've ever seen point and click done in board games.
Not like this. No, I haven't. Seventh Continent would be the closest example that I can think of. In terms of exploration and going from a region to a region, having those regions open up in front of you.
Yeah.
But it's not Seventh Continent. It's a simpler, I'd say more collaborative experience.
Ultimately for me, this is not a rating. I'm not rating this at all. No. Ultimately for me, I think this is, in my rating system, I think this is ultimately going to either be a 3 or 4, depending how the game plays out. I like enough about it, I'm intrigued enough about it, that it could well be a solid, thoroughly enjoyable game. If this promise of the exploration doesn't tie together, then it'll be a 3 for me. An enjoyable game. If it does pull together, if it really is a full depth exploration,
we might sit down for 3 or 4 hours together and play through a chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. Intrigued is the word I started with. Intrigued is the word I will personally
end with. Hopeful the words that I locked in. So, if you've watched to this point, swing over, check out the page, watch what their updates are going to be talking about.
I want this on the campaign page. Quackle up on Board Game Co.
Intrigued and hopeful.